All right, let's get into this. So, Brother G44 on Twitter has just been on fire in the last 24 hours, and he's been explaining some stuff to me that's just blown my mind. So I'm going to try to explain it to you guys. Hopefully not take up too much of your time, but I would definitely not miss a second of this video because there's going to be so much good stuff. So first things first, let me just do a quick recap, as quick as I possibly can, of this sign, which is not easy to explain. Okay, so this sign happened on December 27th and 28th, a couple weeks back. It was, I guess, right after Christmas, before New Year's. The sign is described in book of Acts, chapters 27 and 28, specifically in chapter 27, verse 37, and chapter 28, verse 11. And it's not overtly describing this sign. It's sort of like a hidden thing, right? So what the sign describes is it's a celestial sign, okay? It's a celestial configuration that's being described in the clues and numbers in Acts 27 and 28. So Acts 27 and 28 is those two chapters. The narrative is about Paul being on a ship voyage to Italy, okay, to be brought before Caesar. He's being taken as a prisoner, and it's a very dramatic ship voyage because a lot of stuff goes wrong. And where the sign comes in is, if you like I said, if you look at chapter 27, verse 37, it mentions 276 souls. So for some reason, they're mentioning the exact number of people on the ship. Okay, and then in chapter 28, verse 11, it mentions Castor and Pollux, and it even mentions that this ship had the sign of Castor and Pollux. On the surface, they're just saying it had a sign or like a marking or engraving or something on the ship of Castor and Pollux, but it's using the word sign, so it's kind of like a double entendre or like a hint from God that this is actually referring or describing a sign in the sky or wherever. So, yeah, so the first thing to look at is the fact that, like I said, the narrative itself is talking about a ship voyage, and if you look at Sagittarius constellation, the upper part, if you look at these blue constellation lines, they resemble a ship. Okay, so you got the front and rear mast, and you got a center mast, and you got the ship itself, the hull. So that's the first clue. And the second clue is, like I said, chapter 27, verse 37, it mentions 276 souls. Well, that's referring to 276 degrees of ecliptic longitude, okay? And so that's where the sun should be. So the sun is at 276 degrees of ecliptic longitude. Now, ecliptic longitude it's basically like, if you look at the plane of the solar system, that's the ecliptic, okay? So if you're on Earth, if you're on Earth, it's like an imaginary line in the sky, and all, like, the sun, the moon, and the planets are all following this imaginary line. They're not all over the sky or all over the place. They're all following this line, and they're moving from right to left. That's the ecliptic. But if you look, like, say you're like, position yourself above the solar system, looking down on it, you can look at it as a circle, and that's what I've done here. This red line depicts it in that way in this graphic, and you really have to do that to be able to see what's being described here, and it also explains why I'm saying like degrees, right? Because that's a circle, and a circle has 360 degrees. Okay, so that was that clue from chapter 27, verse 37. The sun has to be at 276 degrees. And that happens on December 27, 28 every year, by the way. The sun will show up right there at 276 degrees, right there at that center mast of our little ship here, right? That happens to be the 276 degrees. Right? And the next part is in chapter 28, verse 11, where it talks about Castor and Pollux. Castor and Pollux is referring to the constellation Gemini. So what happened? So that's the other condition in the sky. So something has to be happening in Gemini. Well, what it's describing is the moon has to be in Gemini, and in 2023, on those 2 days and only those 2 days, when the sun was at 276 degrees, which was also only the case for those 2 days. The moon, which was a full moon, happened to be in the constellation of Gemini at 108 degrees of ecliptic longitude. And to top it all off, Jupiter was in Aries the Lamb, which is the first constellation in the post-Exodus Jewish Mazzaroth. The Gemini and Sagittarius constellations being the 3rd and the 9th. Okay, so you have the Jupiter, the king planet, in the constellation of the Lamb. You've got the full moon in Gemini at 108 degrees. You know, in Castor and Pollux, if you will. And then you've got the sun at 276 degrees. That's the sign, okay? That's what the sign looks like in the sky, okay? And the Jupiter, how does that play in? Because that's not explicitly mentioned or even, it's not even really hinted at in any way in the narrative. Well, if you look at where it was at that point where the sign took place, it was at 35 degrees of ecliptic longitude, and the difference between 276 degrees and 35 degrees, right? Because you have to go past 0, right? 0 degrees is 119 degrees, because it's 84 degrees from the 276 degrees to get to the the 12 o'clock position, and then there's another 35 degrees, so that's a total of 119 degrees. And the book of Acts signals the number 119 in like a million different ways, which I've gotten into in the last few videos. I mean, that's like the number for this book, especially for this chapter 27. It's like all over the place. Like, I can't even list them all because it would take me half an hour. But for instance, like there are 1,007 verses in the book of Acts, and that's 888 plus 119, right? 888 being Jesus Christ. There's just a bunch of other stuff too. So that 119 is part of the book of Acts. It's like it's built into the fabric of it, and that's represented in this sign by the distance between the 276 degrees and then the position of Jupiter at 35 degrees. And so, like I said, the moon is in the 3rd constellation, and the sun is in the 9th constellation, and like it's also like embedded in like the chapter and verse numbers. So for instance, like I said, Castor and Pollux is found in chapter 28 verse 11, and 28 plus 11 is 39, right? 39, 3, 9, 3rd and 9th constellation. And then if you take like for instance, like there's a million ways, but I can just show you one here. If you open a calculator and then you just take like the chapter 28 verse 11, and then you add it to its reverse, 1182, it gives you 3993, right? Also talking, also referring to the 3rd, 9th constellation. There's like I found like 30 of those things, really, really obvious references to 3 and 9 in the numbers of chapter 27 and 28. Okay, so there's that. And okay, so that's the sign. And what does it symbolize? It symbolizes a lot of things. It's we've got the Lamb and Jupiter, the king planet, and the 3rd and 9th constellations, and Jesus was on the cross. The Lamb was on the cross from the 3rd hour to the 9th hour. The king on the cross, Jupiter, right? And it's also symbolizing the fullness of the Gentiles, because you got the full moon, excuse me, in Gemini. So it's symbolizing the fullness of the Gentiles and the end of the church age. When you've got the sun here, over here, at the little ship. Now the little ship is also not just a ship; it's also symbolizing a tabernacle or the sanctuary. Because if you zoom in, I'll zoom in again. It kind of looks a little bit like a 3D tent. So when the sun leaves this position after the sign is fulfilled, it's going, continues to go counterclockwise. So that's like symbolizing Psalms 19, verse 5, where it says, "The bridegroom coming out of his chamber, rejoicing as a strong man to run a race." So that's happening as well. So that's pretty much about as quickly as I can describe the sign. I know it was really fast, but I don't want to focus too much exclusively on the sign. I want to get into some of the new information that I was getting excited about in the last 24 hours. One thing, in the last few videos, I sort of like tried to say that this sign was in the shape of a cross, and I think I even drew a cross in the middle. It really, it isn't on the post-Exodus Mazzaroth, and I thought it was because Stellarium kind of fooled me. The way Stellarium works, and if you don't know anything about astronomy software, this is going to be a little bit mystifying, but you can zoom out and see the ecliptic in this, kind of top-down view as a circle. And the way it centers the ecliptic, it doesn't center it on the ecliptic poles. It centers it on the pole, the planetary poles, like Polaris, like the North Star. And what that does is that gives you like a distorted view of it distorts the positions of the constellations on the Mazzaroth. So if I go back to when the sign occurred, so I'll go back to like December 27th, just before midnight. And so when I first discovered the sign, I was looking at it like this, and let me zoom out a little bit. And this is what I saw, and so it looked like a cross. So you have, it looks like you've got the, ninth constellation Sagittarius here on the right, like it would be on the right part of the clock, like a 3 o'clock hand, and then on the 9 o'clock hand you'd have this third constellation Gemini, and then like right due north you've got Aries the Lamb, and that looks like a cross. So naturally I thought this was depicting a cross. But like I said, this astronomy program kind of distorts the positions of these constellations because of the way it's centering on Polaris. And if you look at it, what you have to do is basically center you have to center on like the ecliptic north or south pole. So I did that, and I have a picture that I took of it, screenshot. Got that either. Yeah, here it is. So let me zoom in real fast. So here it is, like centered on the ecliptic south pole. So this is as if you're way, way, way above the Earth or the solar system and looking down. Okay, that's how you're going to get the most correct view of the Mazzaroth in sort of like a circular aspect or perspective. And so I rotated this whole thing so you can see Aries on the top, because that's the first constellation per Exodus chapter 12. So since I'm centered on the ecliptic south pole, now I have a perfectly represented positions of the constellations along the Mazzaroth, and you can see they're not really, where you would see where you would expect like the third constellation to be exactly here on the 9 o'clock hour, and then on the other side on the 3 o'clock hour. It's kind of like this. So, but that's fine, because it's not so much showing like the shape of a cross, but it's still showing the crucifixion, because it's showing the Lamb and the King planet, and it's showing the 3rd to the 9th, right? The 3rd to the 9th hour. It is depicting, so it is still depicting the crucifixion, and it does actually do the cross shape on the post-Exodus, on the pre-Exodus Mazzaroth. So what happened was, on the pre-Exodus, before the book of Exodus, things were different. So like the Mazzaroth worked like this. You had Virgo at the top, and then everything going around counterclockwise until you came back to Virgo, and then it ends with with Leo. So it's like starts with Virgo, ends with Leo the Lion, the king, right? So it starts with the sin of Eve and ends with God as king, divine government. And and when Exodus, at the time of Exodus, that all changed. Now I don't know if it's a permanent change. It's probably just a temporary change, until Jesus returns, and then maybe he'll return to this, or I'm not really sure. But at the time of Exodus, it changed from this to this. Now instead of the sin of the woman, Virgo, at the top, now you've got the Lamb at the top. Exodus 12, first few verses of Exodus 12 says, "And this shall be the beginning of months for you," and it starts describing the Passover lamb. So you got the Lamb at the top, and then you've got the third constellation here. This is Gemini, ninth constellation down here, Sagittarius. And yeah, so anyway, going back to the pre-Exodus Mazzaroth, in that sense, it is a cross. You do have as I mentioned in the last video, how it has it plays into the number 345, which I have a lot of connections with the rapture to that number, because like I had pointed out, 345 on a clock would be one of the minute hand pointing to the left, right, and the hour hand pointing to the right. That's why God uses that number. So that still applies, right, but only on this pre-Exodus Mazzaroth, where you've got the Sagittarius and Gemini, flattened like this. Now, on this pre-Exodus Mazzaroth, Sagittarius, instead of being the ninth constellation, is the fourth constellation. Gemini, instead of being the third constellation, is the 10th constellation. So you've got 4 and 10, or a 10-4. And that's another thing I'm seeing a lot of is enemy signaling of the number 104. So they're acknowledging the sign. They know what the sign is all about. They know it's that the end of the church age and the beginning of their beast kingdom, but for some reason they want to describe it on these terms. I assume it's because they want to use this Mazzaroth rather than the one that puts the Lamb, Jesus, at the top, because they don't really like him very much. So they'd rather use this one, and it also puts, maybe in their occult mythology, it puts the trans woman at the top, right? Because the god of this world, Lucifer is a transgender god, right? It's like a man who thinks he's a woman, or trying to pretend he's a woman. And that's why we have all this cultural chaos right now with transgender stuff going on. It's because he's trying to make the world and everything in his image. So this would fit his I don't know if that's what they're doing, but this would fit his occult mythology just perfectly. Instead of having Jesus the Lamb at the top of the Mazzaroth system, to put the transgender woman at the top, right? But I don't want to get into that. So where am I seeing this 104? Well, just a ton of places. So especially this, just here in the autumn, in the beginning of winter. So you had Back to the Future film was re-released after how many decades, right? Just for one day or one weekend in theaters nationwide. This was the end of October, and they have that out of time license plate, and that out of time equals that word out of time equals 104 in simple ordinal. Excuse me, simple ordinal. Robert Card was the shooter in Maine. We had that shooting spree in Maine a couple months back. I think that was also October. And Robert Card in simple ordinal is 104. And Matthew Perry just died, and his Instagram post, his final Instagram post, he kept on putting this bizarre phrase in, "I'm Matman," which seemed to be some kind of coded phrase, right? And that in simple ordinal equals 104. He drowned, and drowning is equal to 104 in ordinal. They say that he died at 4:10 p.m. There you go. You got the 4th constellation and 10th constellation. The emergency alert system test was on October 4th, which is 10-4. 10th constellation and 4th constellation. The lead singer of Dixie Chicks died a couple months back, and Dixie Chicks is 104, simple ordinal. David Kozak, you had the Mass shooting in Czech Republic at the University of Prague. That was the name of the shooter. His name in simple ordinal is 104. You had the whole issue with Trump on being removed from ballots. Trump removed from ballot is 104 in reduction. Maine ballot, because it was an issue there where he was getting removed from the ballot in Maine. Maine ballot equals 104 in simple ordinal. Bobby Jean Carter, I don't know exactly. I think she was a musician, famous musician. She just died a few weeks ago, and she equals 104 in reverse reduction. In October, a 104-year-old woman skydove. It's a pretty remarkable historic thing. The 104th NFL season began this fall. And then there was, at Cornell University in the Jewish dining hall, an anti-Semite. The Jewish dining hall is called 104 West, and some anti-Semite threatened to shoot up that dining hall. That happened in late October. So there's just been a ton of signaling in this number, and they're signaling it because they're signaling this celestial sign, which they know perfectly well about. They are very, very aware of these things because they're always watching the sky. They like to dumb down the stuff, or I should say, they want to conceal the knowledge from the general public, but they follow this stuff. In fact, they only give you stupid things like astrology, which is all BS, right? In the churches, they all try to say, oh, if you're looking at the stars at any capacity, it's all astrology, and it's some kind of like sin or something, which is just complete nonsense. Because they want, most churches are run by Freemasons, and they want to keep the laity ignorant, So they're pushing the number 104, just like they constantly pushing the number 192, like the film Leave the World Behind, that's equals 192 in simple ordinal. Great Tribulation equals 192 in simple ordinal. There's just I have a whole list. I won't bring it up now because I don't want to get too much into numbers here, but the reason they were bringing up 192 is also related to this sign. Because if you look at the sign, here's the sign in Stellarium. It's defined by the sun being at 276 degrees and the moon being at 108 degrees. This is all ecliptic longitude, right? And then Jupiter being at 35 degrees, okay? Now, the distance between, if you want to call it distance, I don't know if that's not the right word for it, but the distance between the sun and the moon in this sign is exactly 192 degrees, okay? So from the sun here at 276 degrees to the moon here is 192 degrees. That's why they keep pushing that number. Another way they're encoding that number into their rituals is that I gotta double check it, but I think it's okay. So from 9/11, September 11th attacks, I think it was 1163, but I want to double check it because I don't want to make a mistake and have to re-record this. Okay, yeah, that's what it was. 1,163. Okay, so from September 11th attacks, which was really just a ritual, from that ritual to the time when this 276 sign actually happened on 12/27 going into the 28th, it was 1,163 weeks, okay? That is the 192nd prime number, okay? Because they also use prime numbers in their occult rituals. Anyway, so in Acts chapter 27, it describes a 14-day tarry. And what I think that's referring to is, okay, so here's the sign. We've got the sun at 276 degrees and the full moon in Gemini. And it's going to take exactly 14 days for the moon to swing around the ecliptic, which is this orange line here, and end up in Sagittarius, or the ship, if you will, which is where the sun was. And I can show you that in Stellarium. So here we are. This is December 27th, almost midnight, and I've got the moon selected Just gotta find it. It seems to be off screen somewhere. There it is. It's a red reticule down here. So I'm going to go forward. It's a red reticule here in Gemini. I'm going to go forward by 14 days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Let me zoom in there. So at the 14th day, yeah, it's right around that point there where the sun was. So the sun has moved from the mast from here to here in 14 days. And in that time, the moon has swung all the way around the ecliptic. So what's happening at that time? So that's the 10th going into the 11th. So the moon is there in the ship or the tabernacle or sanctuary, depending on how you want to look at it. Because this is like a ship, but it also looks like a tent. And then it's moving out. And then you've got planet Mars. It's about to intersect that center mass there. I'll put the red reticule on that there. So it hits the center mass sometime toward the end of January 11th. And, Mars is considered by the world, or I should say the ungodly, they consider it the god of war. And so right when Mars hit that center mass at the end of January 11th. And on January 11th, as unsurprisingly, U.S. and Great Britain attacked Yemen, right? Because they watch these things too, and the god of war is doing something celestially, and they make war. Okay, so like I said, the ship here, Paul's voyage ship, also looks like a tent, like a 3D tent, which is like a sanctuary or a tabernacle, and that symbolism is used for this constellation as well in the Bible. So in Daniel chapter 8 verses 13 and 14, there's a prophecy of 2,300 days before the sanctuary is cleansed. Let me just read that here. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So this was January 11th. And I don't know if you guys remember, but that was exactly 2,300 days after the Revelation 12 sign. Which is amazing. So, it's made all the more amazing since, as Brother G44 from Twitter informed me, Michael the Archangel was involved in delivering that prophecy to Daniel. And in the biblical view, Mars, the planet Mars, represents Michael the Archangel. So when Mars touched the mast, it's like as if he cleansed the sanctuary, fulfilling the prophecy of the 2,300 days. And he touched and Mars touched the mast exactly 2,300 days after the Revelation 12 sign, which is astonishing, to say the least. Yeah, and there's one more aspect of this which ties into other things. So I'm gonna have to come back to it because I think it's premature to explain it at this point. But right now, I want to discuss. So this is all happening. The end of the 14-day tarry, and then this, the moon arriving at that sanctuary, and Michael the Archangel, cleansing the sanctuary. This is all happening on a specific day, January 11th. So let's talk about January 11th. The first thing is, I'm sure most of you are aware, but January 11th was being watched by a lot of watchmen because it was the center point of all kinds of solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. I think this one here is from Brother Steve Fletcher, and this one depicts all the lunar eclipses that January 11th was a center point of. It was also center point, like I said, of solar eclipses, notably the exact center point between the recent wedding ring eclipse on October 14th and the next one, the second great American eclipse, which is April 4th. January 11th, 10th through 11th is sort of the center point of all these eclipses. So let's take a look at why we think this date is really significant. And it has to do with this video here that Brother G44 brought to my attention by a channel called Tabernacle of the Bridegroom. And it's titled Hanukkah and the Faithful Witness. And he goes into, he's been researching for many years about how the calendar used to work, I guess, prior to Exodus times. It's more of like the solar calendar that Enoch describes, or that I think he mentions that the Essenes used. And that might be what God is using to determine these prophecy dates. Okay, and we have some evidence to back that up. So, so what he describes is, first of all, the way you determine the first day of the year. Now, the way we do it now, the way I do it in my system is it's like by the sliver of the new moon, if it's in the constellation Aries. He's doing pretty much something similar. The main difference between his system and my system is that whereas the system that I was describing, what I was calling God's calendar, maybe presumptuously, but we basically keep doing that every month. You keep checking the new moon, the sliver of the new moon every month to determine the start of the month. His system is sort of a set and forget system. Okay, and he said this is the way that the old Enochian, or the Book of Enoch, describes it, the solar calendar system. So you do check the new moon to get the beginning of the civil year, but from then on, you don't have to look at the sky again until the next year. You just use this system where you just count days, and it's a really simple count. So what he describes is, okay, so using his system, I got April 21st for the first day of the year. I don't know if that's what he got. It sounds like he might have gotten that, or April 20th, but this is what I get. I see no way it could possibly have been April 20th. That was just a little too early. And this is not terribly far off from the system that I had been using, which gave me a result of April 22nd as the first day of the year, which is I was just using the same sliver of the moon sighting as like Torah calendar, okay? But that's fine. I'm just going to use this for now because it's I think what he's just trying to describe, okay? So 4/21, and it's only one day off from what I had. So 4/21 as the first day of the year. And so then from that, like I said, it's a set and forget system. So all you do from that point is you have this 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, and so on count, right? To give you the months. So you just count, there's like there's a month of 30 days, followed by a month of 30 days, followed by a month of 31 days. And then that pattern repeats. And that's all you do. So if you use 4/21, April 21st as the first day of the year, using a system, which parenthetically is the 111th day of the Gregorian calendar year, maybe that's an interesting piece of data for somebody. You do the count right here, okay? So it's like 30 days for the first month of Nisan, and then you keep doing the 30, 30, 31, 30, 30, 31, and you get the first 8 months, right, with that system. That gives you 240 days, and then we want to get to, kind of giving away the plot here, but regarding January 11th, but we're trying to get to the 24th day of the 9th month. So we take the 242 days plus 24 days, that's 266 days, okay? The 266th day of the year that started on April 21st is the 24th day of the 9th month. And if, what does that work out to? That works out to January 11th. So what we're arguing here is based on his calendar system, January 11th was Kislev 24. Yes, the Kislev 24 that's referred to in Haggai chapter 2, where he says, on the 24th day of the 9th month, I will shake the heavens and the earth. Now, is it correct? Well, his system is definitely intriguing, but we've all heard, we've all heard many intriguing calendar systems over the years. But I think there is we have some other evidence that suggests that it might actually be correct. Now, it just so happens that on that date of January 11th, at the International Court of Justice in the Netherlands at The Hague, a case was opened, a genocide case was opened against Israel concerning the war in Gaza. Now, in English we say The Hague, but The Hague is in the Netherlands, and they speak Dutch, and it's pronounced Den Haag. And isn't that interesting that this is happening on January 11th, a date which we suspect is actually Kislev 24, which is a date that is mentioned in Haggai chapter 2. So there's Den Haag and Haggai. A nice little hint there from God. That is not proof, but we can call it supporting evidence that that calendar might actually be correct. That's pointing, that is considering January 11th, Kislev 24. Which is also, like I said, the center point of all of these so many lunar and solar eclipses, as other channels have pointed out and demonstrated, which is, you know, and Haggai refers to shaking the heavens and the earth, right? Well, that's a pretty big shaking, if you ask me, you know, symbolically speaking. And shaking the earth, that's an earth-shaking development, accusing Israel of genocide. I mean, that's not something that happens every day or even every decade. Okay, and another piece of evidence that points strongly to, or hints strongly, is that, I guess I'll show that little graphic again from Steve Fletcher. I'll go to the bottom here so you can see it closely. From the last blood moon eclipse to the next blood moon eclipse. So the last one was in November 8th, 2022, and the next one is going to be in March 2025. In the midpoint is January 11th, like I said, like this chart shows. But from those two, like the most recent blood eclipse and the next one, it's 429 days to January 11th for each one, right? 429 is 9/24 reversed, right? 9th month, 24th day, Kislev 24. Well, isn't that the hint of all hints? That the center point of all the eclipses is right there in the middle of, you know, is right there 429 days on both sides from the closest blood moons, the most recent and the next, happening to point to Kislev 24. Let's see what else I got here. Well, Haggai chapter 2 also in verse 19 mentions a blessing, and that may in fact match the unspecified blessing of Daniel 12:12, where it mentions you know, after 1335 days, blessed is the man who reaches that 1335 days. And if you recall, we had mentioned before that January 11th was exactly 1335 days after the Operation Warp Speed was announced by Donald Trump. And you know, Daniel 12:11 is mentioning the starting point of that 1335 days as being from when the abomination of desolation is set up. So you know, you can figure that one out on your own. But isn't it interesting that that's a blessing, right? After 1335 days, and Haggai chapter 2 verse 19 also mentions a blessing. That was also mentioned to me by brother G44 on Twitter. Very, very cool hint. Let's see. So there was also this, on that exact day, January 11th, there was a U.S.-controlled oil tanker that was captured by Iran. And the oil tanker was named St. Nicholas. And it was seized by Iran, I should say. This was in the Sea of Oman. and they seized it, citing enforcement of quote unquote acts of law. So they seized a ship, citing enforcement of acts. Hint, hint. Book of Acts, ship voyage. It's all so obvious. The biblical symbolism is just so in your face, and of course, as other people pointed out, this is all happening near the Red Sea, which has obvious biblical allusion. Getting back to our calendar here. So, if this is the correct calendar, which it certainly seems to be at this point, January 11th. If that's Kislev 24, then that's what Haggai 2 is referring to. Then the next day would be, Kislev 25, 9th month, 25th day, first day of Hanukkah, according to the Book of Maccabees. Now, I wanted to come back to something else. Another thing that Brother G44 pointed out to me. See if I can find it. He mentioned that, in the book of Acts, chapter 28. After they departed in the ship of Alexandria, whose sign was Castor and Pollux, tarried at Syracuse for 3 days. And then when you get to Acts 28, verse 15, it says, "And from thence, when the brethren heard of us, they came to meet us as far as Appii Forum and the 3 taverns." Okay, where it says they came to meet us, this word meet, that happens to be Strong's Greek 529. It's only used 3 times in the New Testament. The other 2 times it's used, other than this usage in Acts, are in Matthew 25:6, where it's talking about "go ye out to meet him," referring to when the Lord arrives to the virgins, to the 10 virgins, and the other one is in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, which is the famous rapture verse about meeting the Lord in the clouds, right? So those are the 2, that the other instances or occurrences of this word, other than here in Acts 28:15. So very, very suspicious. So that word meet is being used there. So after this time of being, let's see. So this is sort of like, let's see. This is after the voyage, right? Because they arrive at Rome, and then when they get to Puteoli, which is not yet Rome, they tarry there 7 days, and then they go to Rome. So so right after the verse where they arrive at Rome, they say they meet. They use this word meet. So you can say like after the 14 days of tarrying, maybe. And what is how is that supported? Well, that's Strong's Greek 529, which is a 925 reversed. And remember, the 429 was the 924 reversed, so the 529 is a 925 reversed. So the next day, let's say the 14-day period of tarry from the 276 sign ends here, right, on the 24th. That's the end of the last day of the tarry, of the 14-day tarry. The next day is the 25th, which happens to be, at the end of the voyage. The next day is when they meet the brethren. Right, we came the next day to Puteoli, and where we found brethren, tarried with them, went towards Rome, and then but you guys hopefully see what I'm saying. So after that 14 days of tarry, there's this, or after the voyage, there's this meeting the next day, and so we can we're aligning that to our calendar as after this 14 days of tarry. If that meeting is done on that day, it's also 925, just like the word meet is happening on, is the Greek word 529, the Greek Strong's number 529. Isn't that interesting? Very suspicious, if you ask me. So anyway, so that's pretty heavy stuff there. I think that's really, really strong evidence. So that is, okay, like I said, the first day of Hanukkah, right? If we go by the book of Maccabees, which says Kislev 25 is the first day of Hanukkah. And now we can just count the days of Hanukkah. So anyway, what that means, if this is all not just delusion, that today is the 15th, and it's currently the 4th day of Hanukkah. Very interesting. So we get to the 5th day tomorrow, the 6th day, and then the 7th day of Hanukkah would be on January 18th. So we're looking at that potentially as being a high watch day. And then the next day will be the 8th day of Hanukkah, quote unquote, January 19th. So it could be that the rapture happens on the 18th and maybe the 18th in the west and the 19th in the east, Australia and Asia. Or it just simply happens on the 19th and then the 20th in the east. Or if we have to look at the typology in, I think it was 1 Kings chapter 8, verses, I think 65, where it talks about when Solomon was holding like a dedication feast for the temple that was being built. And first, he does the first week. And remember, Hanukkah is basically just a delayed Feast of Tabernacles, as we learned in the last few weeks. So that Feast of Dedication that's why they call it the Feast of the Dedication, right? Because it's like dedicating a temple. So if we follow the pattern in 1 Kings 8:65, in which Solomon is having this feast of dedication for 7 days, and then he's decides to extend it for another 7 days, then we'd have to be here for another week, taking us to January 25th, which is around, I think, is the full moon, which is, as Brother G44 pointed out, a wolf full moon. That's what this one is. It's called a wolf full moon, and he mentioned, let me look at my messages real fast. Yeah, he says here that would be interesting if it got fulfilled then, because in Isaiah 13:6 it says, "Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty." So is God saying howl there as a sort of a hint to that wolf full moon? I guess that's possible too. And it also would be fulfilling the, what is it? Psalm 81:3. It would be a better fulfillment, I should say, of Psalm 81:3. Blow up the trumpet and in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. So it would be the new moon, because a lot of people think that what it says new moon here, it really means full moon. There's a little bit of a debate going on, so I'm never really quite sure what the correct answer is. Basically, when we're expecting a rapture on a full moon, then I think it means full moon. When we're expecting a rapture on a new moon, then I change my opinion. But for now, the wolf full moon, let's say this means full moon, then that would fulfill that condition, and then it would be the appointed time, right? And it would be on our solemn feast day. Solemn feast day, in this case, would be this extended Feast of Dedication, or Feast of Tabernacles, or Hanukkah, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing. It's just about dedicating a temple. Whether that temple is a physical building in Jerusalem, or whether it's the New Jerusalem temple, the building not built by human hands, body of Christ. So if that calendar is telling us that January 11th is Kislev 24, remember that the oil tanker, the U.S. controlled oil tanker that was seized by Iran, the name of the oil tanker was Saint Nicholas. Now, that's pretty interesting because Kislev 24 is right before Kislev 25, which is the first day of Hanukkah according to the book of Maccabees. Okay? And that Kislev 24 was January 11th, and that was when the oil tanker was seized. Now, if you look at St. Nicholas, which is the name of the oil tanker, St. Nicholas Day is a feast day that's celebrated on December 6th, which is the day before Hanukkah, because Hanukkah is celebrated on December 7th. Isn't that amazing? So they or God, or in any case, we're receiving this hint here regarding January 11th, which is when the tanker was seized. And the hint is sort of saying day before Hanukkah, right? Because that's St. Nicholas Day, which is the day before Hanukkah. It just happens to be the day before Hanukkah according to this Enochian solar calendar. So that's just another piece of evidence, supporting evidence. So what I want to show now is some of the stuff that I've found by when I was constructing this calendar and sort of adding up the days. So, like I said, April 21st is the first day of the year according to this calendar. And Kislev 24 is the 266th day of the year. Okay? Now, the 266th day of the year also happens to be, so 266 days equals 38 weeks, okay? Now, remember, Hanukkah is equal to, in Hebrew ordinal and standard gematria, 38 and 83, respectively. So I just think that's amazing that Kislev 24 lands, according to this calendar system, on the exactly when 38 weeks have, like at the end of 38 weeks. It's just amazing to me because 38 equals Hanukkah, and also Kislev 24 is mentioned in Haggai 2, and Haggai has exactly, that book has exactly 38 verses. So this calendar is lining up pretty like crazy right now. Another thing is that the sign, the 276 sign, like if you add 153 to it, you get 429, which is 924 reversed, like we saw here, right? That's referring to Kislev 24. So it's almost like it's saying numerically from that sign to the rapture, because from that 276 sign to the 153 raptured is 429, right? Now, not necessarily that exact day, obviously not that day because we weren't raptured, but it's pointing to that day as the marker, as a way of pointing to that feast that starts on that day. So it's like sometime within that feast that starts on that day, or the day after that day, that's when the rapture happens. That's what this simple sort of numerical, it's like these numbers are making a statement. It's like a numerical statement. And I study numbers a lot, these biblical numbers, and I see from the most obscure numbers, even with the most, sort of tenuous operations, really, really amazing, significant things like come out of those things. And there is just no way that these are all like major league numbers here with a very simple, basic, elementary operation, that there's no way that this is going to be producing some meaningless number. That God would use these two major league numbers in a simple, elementary operation to produce a meaningless number. So this has to have meaning, and this number only has one meaning that I'm aware of in the entire Bible, and that's this date backwards, this date that's given out in Haggai chapter 2, which is about that time of the year, the Hanukkah period. So it's just another way that sign is pointing squarely at Hanukkah / dedication. Okay, so moving along. Kislev 25. So the next day, the following day after Kislev 24 is the beginning of Hanukkah per the book of Maccabees. That's January 12th. That's Hanukkah day 1, 267th day of the year according to the system that starts on April 21st, and it's also like the 38th week first day. So it's like because 38 equals Hanukkah, so it's almost like saying Hanukkah first day, and it happens to be Hanukkah first day, day 1 of Hanukkah. Pretty amazing. So then the next one is Kislev 26 and 27. We'll just skip over those. And then we get to Kislev 28, which is today, January 15th, which happens to be day 4 of Hanukkah, which is 270 days. So that's like a 27 for Acts 27. Or it's 38 weeks and 4 days, which is 384. Which is amazing because if you look at our sign, if you recall, 276 degrees. The sun was at 276 degrees, okay? And then the moon is at 108 degrees. 276 plus 108 equals 384. So you got 38 weeks and 4 days, telegraphing the number 384, referring back to that sign. So that sign's referring to Hanukkah, and this Hanukkah is referring back to that, you know? So it's all connected. And that time can also be 8 months and 26 days. And 826 is the current Shemitah, according to the official Jewish Shemitah reckoning. Also probably not an accident. Now, the next two ones here, we'll skip over. That's the Hanukkah day 5 and Hanukkah day 6. And then on Kislev 31, which is January 18th, which, by the way, if you've been following my videos for a long time, you know I'm on this quest to discover the meaning of this 118 number that I've found, that I've noticed, I should say, over the last year, in news and stuff like that. And I would really like to figure out the mystery of that. So if we get raptured on that day, then the mystery solved. I can put that behind me. Not be tormented by it anymore. So this is Hanukkah day 7, okay, January 18th, which is 273 days, or 39 weeks. So ain't that something right there? We got your 3rd and 9th constellation. And it also happens to be the day on which 346 days are left in the normal Gregorian calendar year. Okay. Now, if you go, was there another meaning for that? I think it's just if you go to Pi search and you look at, well, I had it in there already. Yeah. If you look at 153 in Pi, it's occurring at position 344, which means that it ends at position 346. So if we get rapture on that day, that would match that, because that's the position that number 153 is in the number pi. Now, if we get raptured on that day, let's see, I guess it wouldn't satisfy Esther 2:16 because it says brought before the king in the month of Tevet. But, or it could mean that we're raptured and somehow, like, the process takes some time and we're actually brought before the king, by the time we're in heaven, it's already Tevet 1, something like that, who knows, right? But let's look at the next day anyway. So Tevet 1 is January 19th, so that's interesting right off the bat from that date perspective. That's your 119. That's telegraphed so heavily by the Book of Acts. It's also a reverse 911, so it'd be a good day to start the tribulation, because they want to start it with the second 911. That's the 8th day of Hanukkah. That's exactly from the start of the year on this Enochian solar calendar system. That's 8 months and 30 days. it's another 83, right? Because remember, in Hebrew gematria, Hanukkah is 38 in ordinal or 83 in standard. So you got your 83 there, 8 months and 30 days. Or it's 38 weeks and 8 days, which is amazing. So that's another one right there. You got your 38 for your Hanukkah, 8th day. Hanukkah, 8th day. And 388, if you reverse it, it's 883. And 883 just so happens to be the 153rd prime. What are the odds? another thing I passed over here, but the 276 sign happened on December 27th going into the 28th, right? And the 28th of December was, according to this Nokian calendar system, the 252nd day of the year, which brings to mind Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. Pretty cool. So then the next thing is something I noticed, but I think is very interesting to stumble upon something like this. 252 days happens to be exactly 8 months and 8 days. Isn't that something? Get your 88. So that sign happened on the 8th month and 8th day of the year, according to the system. It's just, I mean, this is, when I see things line up like this numerically so strongly and everything just click into place like this, it just feels right. It seems like it has to be right. And of course, it doesn't mean it is, but that's just how it seems to me. Okay, so another thing that Brother G44 pointed out, which I thought was very cool, is, so starting on January 19th, right, our Kislev 24 date, this calendrical phenomenon began, okay, where the Gregorian calendar date and the official Jewish calendar date started to have this like mirror effect. So you have like January 11th, and then you have the first day of Shavat, which is the 11th month. Okay, that's the Gregorian calendar, and then that's the official Jewish calendar. And then the next day is January 12th, second day of Shavat, and so on and so forth. And if you continue this, first of all, this phenomenon only lasts for 9 days, which is interesting because, the Hanukkah is a 9-day feast, at least in the traditional version of it, the traditional modern Jewish version of it. And so that lasts for 9. This phenomenon lasts for 9 numbers, and it does. It is astounding that it's like this date. These days happen to be like the days of Hanukkah. Actually not, right? Because it looks like Hanukkah began on Kislev 25, which would be starting right here. So maybe we've got the calendar off somehow wrong here, but nevertheless, let's leave that aside for a moment. These days are all like in the form of a menorah, let's say it like that, with the count of the Hanukkah day count built in. I mean, how often does something like this happen? Especially on such an important Hanukkah from a watchman standpoint. We'll say it that way. And related to numerical menorahs is something I noticed the other day. Is I don't know if you saw my last video, or I don't know if I mentioned it in my last video or the second to last video. But I was mentioning this concept of a a binary door, which is why you have these rapture-related verses using certain numbers. So, like Revelation 12:5, for instance, is referring to the rapture, right? The child gets caught up, but that's 125, which is 5 cubed. Okay, and then you've got this Acts 27. Okay, referring to this sign, this rapture sign, and then we've got the book of Acts in general, also heavily telegraphing the number 119. So what is it with these numbers, right? That are being used in a rapture context? Well, you have to look at the binary number system. Binary is the system of numbers that computers use. That you only have a 1 and a 0. There's no 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can only count with 1 or 0. So if you want to count 1, it'd be 0, 1. 2 is 1, 0. 3 is 1, 1. And you run out of space. You run out of possibilities at that point. You got to add an extra character to get to 4. That's 4. And then 101 is 5. So 5 in binary is 101. Now, what is 101? It's a type of door, because the one on either side is like a wall, and then you've got the door in the middle there. That's the 0. It's like a opening, right? So if you just start adding thickness to the walls here by adding extra ones on either side, but you have to keep it symmetrical, right? So you have to add a 1 on both sides. You get this number. Now, this number in binary equals 27 in decimal. So that's why you have the 27. So you get the 5, like Revelation 12:5 is 5 cubed, and you get the 27, like Acts 27. And then you add another 1 on either side, you get this binary number, which is 119 in decimal. Now you can do other variations. Instead of having a door that's just 1 0 thick, you can have a door that's 3 zeros thick. So for instance, this one right here, you've got a wall of 2 1s and a door on either side, and then you've got a door that's 3 zeros thick, and it kind of gives you a door appearance. And it has to be symmetrical, and that equals a decimal, and in decimal that equals 99, which is another rapture number they use sometimes. Now, rapture in in simple English gematria equals 99, and that's no coincidence. So what I realized the other day was that of all these variations, why is the book of Acts really pushing the number 119? Why not 5 more or 99? It's because if Acts, like we find all this evidence that Acts is really the sign that's defined in Acts, this 276 sign, is so strongly sort of like it's built into its fabric. It's like pointing to the Feast of Dedication, some Feast of Dedication. It doesn't say exactly which one, but probably it's the exact next one. But if it's pointing to that, which is Hanukkah, well, why not use the binary door number that looks like a menorah? That's what I figured out. I was looking at it, I said, hey, you know what? That looks a lot like a menorah right there. Okay, because you've got your 7 candles here, and the middle candle is the door. Remember, the middle candle is the one for that's like stands in for Jesus Christ, who is the door. So if the middle one is the door, and then you've got the other 3 candles on either side, that's a menorah. That's what the 119 is all about. It's really brilliant, how all this stuff fits together. And there's so many layers. It's so deep. I mean, I probably only scratched the surface of the depth of this stuff, but it's really, really, we're really blessed to be able to witness these things and understand these things, because these are secrets that have been kept secret, for, all of history. So that sign, that 276 sign or multi-sign or whatever, that occurred right at the end of the church age. It occurred right at the end of 2023. So you have all this stuff in the Bible that points to 2023. That's where everybody was sort of like confused when 2023 passed, and we thought, well, what's all this stuff? You got like 2 Thessalonians 2:3. You've got Habakkuk 2:3, and you got all these rapture verses that seem to call attention to 2:3 or 23 or 2:23, but then 2023 passes and there's no rapture. So what I think is going on here is that you've got all that stuff is pointing correctly to 2023, but that's not necessarily the rapture moment, because that's what it is like this 276 sign is kind of like the flag in the ground at the very, very end of 2023, from which is attached a predefined Terry period, a period of Terry, okay? So you got the entire church age, and then at the very end of it, on the last year of 2023, you've got this anchor point from which there's like a predefined period of Terry attached that can extend into the subsequent year. I think that's how it works, okay? And so that anchor point, I believe this 276 sign to be that anchor point, okay? That's why it comes at the very, very end of 2023. It's no accident that God put it there. Because that way all of his numbers can, his prophecy, end times numbers, his numerics can work, still. All the encoding of 223 and 23 and chapter 2 verse 3 or chapter 23 or chapter 2 verse 23, stuff like that. That all still connects. It all still links up, but it's pointing to that sign, and then the sign then just has it's kind of like an off ramp, right? At that point, that's the exit. The exit is still within the state of 223. If it's one of the American states, for instance, right? It's still within that state. That off ramp where you get off, but the off ramp itself maybe cuts into the neighboring state. Maybe I should say it like that. That makes a little more sense. So, what's next? Let's see. I did get a message from Brother G44 just now. Okay, so he wants me to look at Ezekiel 44:26. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, it says, "And after he is cleansed, they shall reckon unto him 7 days." Excuse me. So after he is cleansed, he must wait 7 days. So when we were talking about the Mars coming here and cleansing the sanctuary, is that what I was calling it? Yeah, cleansing the sanctuary. So from that point, which was, I guess, about January 11th into the 12th, where Mars or Michael the Archangel cleansed the sanctuary. So using that, adding the 7 days from that verse in Ezekiel. Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so that also takes us to January 18th, day 7th of Hanukkah. So yeah, it looks to me like most likely, assuming this calendar is correct, and it seems like it really is correct. Like this is the one we should be looking at. There's so much evidence, just celestial evidence and circumstantial evidence that is correct. Then Hanukkah began on the 12th, and it looks like the rapture would most likely be on the 7th day, the 8th day, the 14th day, or the 15th day. Now we need to think about which one of those days if we really want to narrow it down. But those are super, super high watch days in my book. There's a couple of other things I wanted to mention. I noticed that Yemen is so what's the word, prominent in the news right now. And when I keep saying Yemen, and that made me think, it sounds a lot like ye men of Galilee, So I looked in, this is great software, by the way, King James Pure Bible Search. It's free software. I'm sure you can just Google it and find it. But you can search all kinds of cool stuff. Sorry for my whacked out fonts here. I know it's kind of hard to read, but if you search for ye men, okay, and I'm trying to do, I don't know. Okay, yeah, I need to include the Old Testament. Okay, in the whole Bible, there are exactly 13 occurrences of ye men, and 5 of them are in like the Old Testament, and 8 are in the New Testament. All of the ones in the New Testament happen to be in the book of Acts. So we've got this this stuff going on in the Red Sea with ships and that ship being seized by Iran, citing acts of law, calling out the book of Acts that way, and a bunch of other stuff referring to Acts that I mentioned in past videos with, leave the world behind. Just a whole ton of Acts connections. And then it's all happening near the country of Yemen, and the phrase ye men happens to be found in the New Testament exclusively in the book of Acts. It's just, the signs are just, at this point, they're so loud, they're speaking so clearly, you'd have to be like really spiritually blind, not to be able to see this stuff. But So that's amazing. Yeah. So then what you have here is 8 out of 13 are in Acts. So I thought, well, that kind of reminds me of Psalm 81:3, right? Because that's 8 and 13, which is the verse about blowing the trumpet at the new moon, which could actually be referring to the full moon, depending on what interpretive stance you take on that. So that would push us into the January 25th time frame. So that's just another hint. Maybe it's nothing, but you know, a lot to be excited about because I mean we're so close. You know, what difference does a week make? Okay, so the last thing I wanted to really show was a couple of things from my, let's see, my comments that I made on my video. My pinned comment actually. Well, I guess I can just read it from my other screen. So, yeah, okay, so something I said in my last video, I was talking about Acts 27:37, and I think I mentioned that it's the 969th verse of the Bible, which refers to Methuselah. And yeah, that's true, but I also mentioned that it's the 38th verse from the end of the book. And that was a mistake. But what's correct is actually far better. It's actually the 39th verse from the end of the book. So wow, what an amazing, you know, reinforcing piece of reinforcing evidence that's not that we need any, but that this verse is one of the verses that's defining a celestial sign that's involving the third and ninth constellations. Just like how Acts 28:11, you know, 28 plus 11 equals 39, or the 28:11 plus 11:11 8:2 equals 3993. And so now we have this Acts 27:37 is the 39th book, the 39th verse from the end of the book. It's really astonishing. There's another one that I found that points, I mean, really, really squarely at the year. So if you look at the number of verses in the book of Acts is 1007. And if you take 223, which is a sort of numerical way to represent 2023, plus 784, which refers to the current Jewish year 5784, equals 1007. How about that? That's amazing. Now, if you take that number of verses in the book of Acts, 7001, you just reverse it, right? 7001 instead of 1007, and then you subtract from it 1007. Let's see, 7001 minus 1007, you get 5994, which is the current year Anno Mundi. Well, technically I say Anno Fall. That's my I don't know, invention. But yeah, most people say AM. So how about that? Isn't that amazing? You've got all the years that the sign occurs in, like every calendar year. You've got the Gentile calendar year. You've got the false Jewish calendar year. And you've got the true calendar year. Isn't that amazing? So, yeah. Let's see if there's any more. Okay, how about this one? Let's see. Okay, so Acts 27:37, right? Mentions 276 souls. Okay, so you have there the numbers 27, 37, and then 6, right? Because you've got 27, and then it's kind of like duplicated there, and then 37 and a 6. And if you do 27 times 37 times 6, Voila. 5994. Current year, Anno Mundi. The number 276 that's intimately associated with the sign is equal to 12 times 23. And the sign occurred in December 23. The number, like I shown in previous videos, 119 is very closely tied to the book of Acts. If you take 360 degrees minus 119 degrees, you get 241, which is Zerubbabel in Hebrew. Remember, Zerubbabel is the one who God said he would take in Haggai chapter 2. So that's just another of many, many ways that Acts is pointing to Haggai 2 and Feast of Dedication, in John chapter 10, and additionally, John chapter 11. Okay, and 119 is also, looks like 11 times 9, which equals 99, which equals rapture in simple ordinal, and it's also the different version of a binary door. The word dedication in the King James Version occurs 11 times in 9 verses. There's your 119. Again, 119 pointing to the Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. And I think I mentioned in the previous videos that the first time the word dedication is used in the Bible is in Numbers chapter 7, verse 84. Whoops, 784. According to the current Jewish year, 5784. Acts 28:11 is the 27,911th verse of the Bible, and that's 27 for Acts 27, and backwards 119. From let's see. Let's take a look at Acts 27:37, the other verse. Like I mentioned, that's the 969th verse of Acts and the 39th verse from the end of the book. So you got the Methuselah and then the third and ninth constellation. It also happens to be the 27,893rd verse of the Bible. And that gives you your Acts chapters 27, 28. That's your 278. And then your 9-3. Ninth and third constellations. From the end of the Bible, it's the 3,209th verse from the end of the Bible. That's 329. Third constellation to the ninth constellation. Third hour to the ninth hour. Like I mentioned, for Acts 28:11, 28 plus 11 equals 39. 28 times 11 equals 308. That's 38. Hanukkah and Hebrew ordinal equals 38. Let's see here. Okay, if you break up the number, so you do like a of the number for the verse for the chapter and verse Acts 27:37. So we do 2 plus 737, right? And then a 27 plus 37, and then a 273 plus 7. Okay? And you sum those up. Okay, so you got 2 plus 737 is 739, and then a 27 plus 37 equals 64. 273 plus 7 is equal to 280. Now if you add all those up, you get 1083. What does that mean? That means 108 degrees in the third constellation. Moon is at 108 degrees in the third constellation in that sign. I think I showed this before, but if you do 2737 plus its reverse number, 7372, equals 10109. So 119 again. If you do 2827, which is like chapters 28 and 27 of Acts, plus its reverse, which is 7282, you get 10109. So 119 again. And I showed this before. 2811 for Acts 28 verse 11 plus 1182 3993. Third constellation, ninth constellation. Third hour to the ninth hour. Acts is the 44th book of the Bible, and we're looking at chapter 27, verse 37, and you add those all together, and you get 108. That's 108 degrees. This was the position of the moon. And if you do 153 plus 39 equals 192 degrees. 192 degrees between the position of the sun and the position of the moon on the sign. And if you do 153 minus 39, you get 114, which is Genesis 1:14. Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And that verse is equal to 3744 in Hebrew Gematria, I believe, standard. Yeah, Hebrew standard. And then if you take the 2737 from Acts 27:37 and add to that 1007, the number of verses in the book of Acts, you get 3744. Genesis 1, chapter 4, verse 14. And then the Hebrew standard gematria value, the English ordinal gematria value of that verse in the King James Version is equal to 1371. And if you take 13, multiply it by 71, equals 923. Ninth constellation to the third constellation. Let's see. If you take Psalm 19:2, I won't type it out, I'll just read it. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. So it's referring to the sun, moon, and stars there, right? The Hebrew ordinal value of that is 309. Third constellation to the ninth constellation. The phrase in Luke 21:25, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. That's exactly how it's rendered in King James Version. Equals in English Standard Gematria 28:27. Acts 28 and 27. And that, like I said, that is found in verse Luke 21:25, which is equal to 94:74. If you take 94 plus 74, you get the 168 degrees, which is the distance in that sign between the sun and the moon. On the shorter side. On the long side, it's 192 degrees. On the other side, it's 168 degrees. So anyway, I could go on for hours. I found so many of these things, but I think you get the point. There's, this sign is so evident and so baked into the numbers of not only Acts 27 and 28, especially Acts 27 and 28, but also throughout the Bible. You'll find amazing connections between, numerical connections from verses that talk about the sun, moon, and stars to this sign, because this sign is like the sign for the end of the church age. So I guess I'm going to end it here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you were blessed by it. And yeah, thanks again. God bless.